rocks, So these seem to be threat displays. In nature, an animal doesn't want to attack unless it gets some benefit out of that. Defending its family or its territory or its social group,
sure.
or its
unless it's on the hunt.
Source.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there are reports, like Teddy Roosevelt told that story of the guy who was almost beheaded by a thing that left giant human-like tracks. There are all these cases of missing people in the forests, and some people speculate, that it could be Sasquatch attacking. I've never met somebody who was attacked by a Sasquatch, but I think that those people who were attacked by one would be very unlikely to survive.
Yeah, I would think if they were attacked, their history.
I would imagine so. And, there's, along with these kind of spiritual Native American views, the forest brother, the guardian of the mountain, the boss of the woods, there also is the idea of them being sort of an ogre. Often they were described as devils. Many of the places along the map, you can find these places, Devil Mountain, Devil Ridge, whatever. Those are also areas where there used to be, or perhaps currently still are, many reports of these things living there. The local natives wouldn't even go up into the Bluff Creek Basin, I'm told, because they considered that the domain of these creatures, and it was, dangerous. Not just physically, but, you could get cursed. There's sort of a taboo. If you even just saw one, some natives have told me it means you're going to die. This is part of the legend and the lore of the thing. It has a mysterious power that hasn't really been understood, even with the thousands of years of experience that these Native Americans have had.
All right, let's go to a whole bank of phone calls here for us, Stephen. Let's go to Dan driving around somewhere in California. Go ahead, Daniel.
Thank you, George. You brought up the subject of the missing link. Here's what I think. I think we did all come from apes, maybe gorillas or monkeys, either way. And I think that the missing link so horrified the advanced version of the humans that the humans killed it because it was a reminder that we did come from the apes. And that might explain why there's no missing link.
You know what? Anything's possible. Dan, when you drive, if you're driving a truck, have you seen anything strange out there?
Well, the strangest thing I ever saw was in a back issue of Time magazine. Stephen King getting John Lennon's last autograph.
Not this again.
Yep. All right, let's go to Tulsa, Oklahoma. Gary, welcome to Coast to Coast.
Awesome. Hey, George, it's an honor to speak with you and listen
Likewise.
to you all the time.
Thank you.
My question is, well, actually, I had a comment. I had a friend of mine that told me that there was an Indian tribe, I don't know if it was the Arapaho or what, that they had captured a breeding pair some time back, and they were holding it. Somehow they escaped. But I kind of wanted to know if Stephen knew anything about that, but I also had a question because he was talking about DNA earlier tonight, and he said that somebody had shot at one. I think it was in the Sierras, and I'd want to know if he could address that.
Sure. We don't know. Was that a real case? Did somebody truly shoot one?
Well, it's yet to be proven, but there's blood on the boots, and they've apparently sent, I know that they've sent a sample that was found from the kill site to the DNA project in Texas, and that passed muster as not being a known animal. So we don't know yet what it is because of the peer review and the secrecy of the journal publishing process, but it's a tall tale. They were driving along hunting for bear, supposedly legally. Perhaps, though, they were taking pot shots out the window. But the fellow claims to have had bear tags, and they saw something come out of the brush waving its arms or whatever. There's been various versions of the story, and he just went into the hunter mode,
Yeah.
And he felt compelled just to shoot.
I don't. Where's the body?
Bad guy, killer. He just shot at it and panicked, and then another one supposedly ran out of the brush. It was a juvenile, and he shot this one too in this hunter's blood or whatever, and apparently it died in his arms, and that's where the blood on the boots comes from. They have supposedly what they've been calling Bigfoot steak. Some people speculating in the nature of pounds of this stuff stashed away in freezers right now, waiting.
Oh my God!
I don't know if it's true though. I mean, there's a lot of telling signs in the story that it may be fake. But I mean, I know some people handling it. The Olympic Project handled this. Guy Derek Randall's very dedicated and intelligent researcher, and I know people who went and investigated on the site, Bobo and others. Jeff Meldrum, the Idaho
good researcher. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, these people, very sensible people, they investigated the story and they believe it. So we're just going to have to wait and see what comes out of this. There's a book being published and so forth, you know.
Yeah.
But it could be true. You learn in the world of Bigfoot not to get your hopes up too much with these things, though.
What about a pair that he was talking about?
Now, Arapaho story, I've never heard that.
I haven't either.
But there are always these stories of, you know, Bigfoot breeding with humans. And the Hoopa people around here, they say that when this happened, if the resulting infant was alive, they would abandon it out in the woods. And it was perhaps taboo, you know, they didn't want such a thing, cursing the tribe. But apparently these may have gone off and lived with the Sasquatch, adopted by them. So you have a lot of these theories that the Bigfoot is actually a hybrid between humans and some other proto-human.
That's interesting.
You know, we know from the current discoveries in paleoanthropology that many times in history there have been multiple forms of hominins living at the same time. And we bred with Neanderthals, and just recently they said we have some 3% or whatever Neanderthal genes in us. So this is a plausible idea that Bigfoot is some form of human. But, I mean, not literally a human being.
What do you think the population is? Couple thousand?
Yeah. Who knows? I'm inclined to think it's a really rare thing, but there are people like right outside of Chicago who report them living there. For them to be widespread across the country, into Canada, and then various forms of them all across the world. You know, we have the little orang pendek in the Southeast Asian islands, Indonesian islands. There, you know, all over the world. The Yowie in Australia. There seem to be these various forms of them, but not necessarily morphologically the same either.
Right.
But perhaps also closely related, that they've evolved in their own unique ways.
All right, let's go to our international line. We've got John out there in Switzerland. Go ahead, John. Thanks for calling.
Oh, thanks for having me on, George.
Sure thing.
And I just have an experience I had in Wisconsin about 35 years ago, if you wanted to hear about it.
Yes, love to.
All right, well, I was watching TV with my family in the living room, and I had a weird feeling come over me, and sort of a tunnel vision and sort of a strange sound in my ears. And nobody else in the living room seemed to be affected by it, so I just kind of stood up and walked outside to the front porch. And our house, the back of the house, connects with a long woods that goes up to Interstate 90, and that has a woods that goes all the way up into Canada. So we're at the lower part of the state, and I just walked out the front porch, and I was looking around, and I was feeling kind of weird because I couldn't quite see over to the left side of the house. So I walked over to the porch, looked out there, and then walked back to the front steps, grabbed a pitchfork as I was walking over to that side of the house. I walked around to that side of the house, and there was a little patch of woods. And it was all real dark, and I was looking through there, but I couldn't see the neighbors' houses where I would normally see them. It was like a dark patch there. And I kept walking towards the dark patch, walking real close to it. But I had that pitchfork held out in front of me. And about 5 feet away from the edge of this woods, I stopped, and for a second or so, I just stood there about 2 seconds. And all of a sudden, the woods just started moving to my left, and it moved real fast, and brush was going, and I saw the top of its head, and it was about 9 feet tall, and ran through the woods. And then I went out there in the morning, and I looked at the woods, and all the bushes were knocked over, and they weren't run around, they were run through, and they were like a pullback, 600-pound pullback ran through there.
That's a great story. You're a believer now, aren't you?
Oh, I'm definitely a believer. It wasn't it was a two-legged animal. It was 9 feet tall, and it scared the hell out of me.
I had a case in the woods once where I saw a creature that went by so fast, Stephen, I couldn't identify it. It was big. It made a big noise. It seemed like it was moving faster than a bear could, and it just went right through the woods. And, it could have been a human being. I don't know. But it was strange. My son was with me, so he heard the same thing. And that's the closest I've come to something like that.
Yeah,
are we still getting a lot of sightings in your neck of the woods?
I'm sorry, you talking to me?
Yeah. Are we still getting a lot of sightings out there?
As I sit here in my shop, to my left, over behind the cabins, the vacation cabins they have over there was a report of one coming down and looking into the windows there. That wasn't too long ago. And then right in front of me across the river, there's a little 2-lane highway in front here. Down on the river bar, there was a fellow who worked for one of the government agencies, Fish and Game or the Forest Service, and he heard this roar, a howl-like roar, and looked out the front of his tent flap and saw the thing walking, not on 4 legs, walking bipedally along the river bar. And then this was confirmed. He came up, the restaurant here next to my shop, the fellow was opening his store, his shop, restaurant, kind of the small restaurant shop for the morning, and he had heard the same sound. And this fellow who was camping down at the river bar came in, his eyes bulging out of his head, and is obviously in a state of extreme excitement. And they confirmed, that was the same sound, and that's very interesting. All behind my store here on the ridge, including the lady who works in the fire lookout up there, she has found beds and footprints and had a glimpse of one behind a bush. It was some tall head and shoulders, long hair coming off it, and she didn't think it was a Rastafarian or a pot grower.
Have you heard reports of fireflies being seen around Bigfoot?
You mean kind of like orbs?
Almost like little orbs, yeah, but they're the fireflies, these little insects.
Well, no, not so much the fireflies, but I have friends who, despite being very rational people, have seen these little lights dancing, and they were supposedly associated with Sasquatch being in the area. I don't know about the bugs.
What about the smell?
Well, the smell, yeah. If this thing is human, you would think it learned how to bathe, but
you would
anyway,
think, yeah. Of course, some humans don't even know that, Stephen.
Yeah, it's true. I think a lot of the sightings may indeed be homeless people or crazy people out in the woods, but the smell is very overwhelming. I've heard it described as the worst skunk combined with the worst dead thing, combined with, someone who hadn't bathed in a month and wet their pants and maybe smelled like a slop truck.
Well, if they're more animal than human-like, they probably don't bathe. They probably wouldn't even think about it.
No, maybe just incidentally when they went into the...
Though most animals clean themselves. Cats clean themselves. Dogs will,
Yeah, well, the smell and the shaggy hair and stuff, it does indicate to me that this is a wild creature. Even if it's a human some form of human ancestral branch. You
Right.
know, it does seem to live like a beast. You know, there's very, very few reports of clothing or tool use or fire use or even decent shelters. You know, these claims of stick structures and stuff that are shelters. Well, most of them wouldn't even provide any comfort. You know, so. Maybe this is a lifestyle they choose, you know, one with nature and so forth. But I don't think any intelligent creature would enjoy being that smelly, you know. So
you would think not.
It may just be certain individuals. A lot of people think that it's a smell that's released, like gorillas do, a sort of pheromone-laden smell that is meant to repel potential threats, you know. That may indeed be part of this panic that people experience sometimes when they've seen these creatures.
Well, that's right. Stephen, we're going to come back. We're going to take final phone calls with you in just a moment on Coast to Coast AM. And then next hour, we are going to talk about the beast of Boggy Creek. It's another incredible part of the story here. It's Creature Night on Coast to Coast AM. So we shall be right back. Those of you online, just stay where you are so you don't lose your place. And, of course, as I mentioned, next hour we're going to talk about the beast of Boggy Creek. Hey, by the way, help us out a little bit. The California Earthquake Authority, KFI AM 640, our L.A. affiliate, and the American Red Cross, they are joining forces to send an urgent message to get prepared California in case there's another disaster. And they're raising some funds that you can help with. Now through April 27th, so only a few more days to go, you can bid on a dinner with me at Morton's in Burbank. That's right. And we'll have a little tour of the KFI studios, and then we'll bring you back here and let you watch some of Coast to Coast for an hour before the car takes you back to Burbank. Anyways, you can bid on that. I'm really close to passing up a few of the guys there on KFI, so take advantage of it. Go to KFI640.com. That's KFIAM640.com. In the search, put Red Cross, then click auction, and I'm down there at the bottom, and make your bid. So, Stuart, tell me, Stephen, what is new for you when you go out there and do what you do? The bookstore, the blogs, what's next for you?
Well, currently we've been working on what we've been calling the Bluff Creek Film Site Project. And this was just a sort of comprehensive effort to understand the history of the events that have gone on up there from the late 40s until the current day. But I'm specifically regarding the Patterson film. So when I started looking into this in 2001, I had nothing but the sketch map in John Green's pamphlet book from the early 70s. And I went trying to find the film site and just got lost up there in the winding creek. So it took years to try to get a grasp on that. And along the way, went up there in 2007 with some friends from the BFRO, and we found that no one really knew exactly where the film site was, even though Bob Gimlin, who was there with Roger Patterson that day, had said that he kind of remembered the first sighting spot. We found that there were like 5, 6, 7, a growing number of theories about where this film site was located. And we had to investigate all of them up about 6 miles of the creek, going and trying to find those famous big trees that you see in the background of the film. It was quite a saga. You know, we've got 65 or so videos up on YouTube right now. It greatly exceeds like European art house cinema, but we documented the whole process, and we were hoping this could be a demonstration of how to apply a certain research methodology and rigor and to discover real history and real facts in a field that is quite often based upon things that can't be proven, you know. So we actually managed to find this film site last year, and we surveyed the site, did a grid map, and documented all these old artifacts that were actually still there on the ground, you know, on the sandbar, which had not been washed away as many speculated. It was mostly still there. The whole trackway of the creature is still there. It's now a big overgrown forest of new growth, but the stumps and the log piles from 1964 and the flood and the salvage logging that were done after that, we were actually able to document those and prove, with the help of a geologist friend of ours, using trigonometry and geometry, that this is the true site. So sometime this summer, it's kind of secret, we're going to go back up there with some of the big names in Bigfooting, and we're hoping this will provide some still useful information on the film itself and what size lens was used and how tall the creature was, whether it could have been a hoax, a man in a suit, or just too big to have been such a thing.
All right, back to the phones. Mike is in Ithaca, New York. Hey, Mike, welcome to the program. Go ahead.
I know this is final phone call, so it's going to be really hard. First of all, the idea of a missing link is based on the idea of the scala naturae, or natural scale, or natural ladder in Latin, which is the idea that it's just like a linear progression, but it's actually a branching tree. And modern humans are mostly Homo sapiens, but two other branches have hybridized. It's Homo denisova and Homo neanderthalensis, and it's a bit of all of them. And Sasquatch could be some other mixture of those three species. The mitochondrial DNA, according to Ketchum, is sapiens, but she says the nuclear DNA is too, but it might be a distant branch of sapiens. And one of the nuclear genes she's looking at is FOXP2, which is a very ancient gene. It occurs in plants and animals and their common ancestor, and even some bacteria. But how well a creature can speak will be betrayed by the minute details in its version of FOXP2, and that's one of the genes she's examining. Like, we know that Neanderthal had the full range of musicianship and literary skills that most of us have, because they have the full range of the variants of FOXP2 that we have, and possibly Sasquatch have that too, and we'll be able to find that out. And as far as the Patterson-Gimlin film, in 1967, the head of the genetics department here at Cornell explained to me that when she put her foot down in that film, a shock wave goes up her subcutaneous fat, up her leg, all the way up into her buttock. And there was no tech to fake that in any way with a monkey suit or anything else. Maybe today they could do it with computer animation, but back then there's just no way that could have been faked.
All right, well, good impressions. Stephen, what do you think of that?
Yeah, well, we're just going to have to wait on the DNA, but one of the biggest problems is if it's so close to human, how are we going to discern? And so they're taking a close look at certain areas in the DNA, trying to find out these things that are distinct from human.
And again, there's so many samples. I mean, how many did you say there were?
Well, I don't know how many are in the final test, but over 100 samples were submitted, and they narrowed it down. So they found consistency, that these things are all basically the same species of creature. Some form of hominin, not just a hominid, not just an ape, but some form of proto-human, or perhaps even closer than we perhaps would feel comfortable with. There are reports of this thing speaking and knowing language and so forth. So that's very intriguing.
Do they have an organized plan to announce the results, whatever they may be?
Oh, yeah. Like I said before, it's very frustrating because we keep hearing rumors. And those of us who knew about this thing, it's been more than 2 years. And we keep hearing very soon, very soon, very soon. And, everyone's rooting for Melba Ketchum, even the people who are kind of critical of some of the things she says. We just hope that this thing will prove something. It may not conclusively say Bigfoot is real, but it will prove that there is some substance to what's been seen by so many really reliable people. The public media doesn't give you a real solid impression of how real some of this stuff is. You see jokes like the beef jerky ads, and you see these things on television that just sort of make a comedy of it. But the more you look into it, the more you talk to witnesses, the more you read all the books, like I've read some 70 of them, the more you see that there's something going on here. It doesn't seem to all be in someone's mind, like a hallucinatory experience. So we're hoping DNA will put some feet on the ground for that.
All right, let's go to Anthony in Spokane, Washington. Hey, it's your turn, Anthony.
I wonder if either of you guys have heard the theory that the sound usually considered to be the scream of Bigfoot might actually be the sound created by the creature's appearance or disappearance. And George, do you still have Art's recording of the Bigfoot scream?
He gave it to us, and we'll get it ready for you, and we'll play it.
All right, thanks.
Okay, you got that. Did you ever hear that sound, Stephen? You're going to right now. Here we go. Does that sound real to you, Stephen?
Yeah, it's hard to say. You know, I've never heard anything quite like that in the woods, and I hear a lot of strange noises in the woods. I don't know that there is a famous recording that was proven to be from some documentary that was a recreation. I'm not sure if that is the one, but I have friends who've heard that. They say that's a pretty authentic sound. But you know, we heard some owls up by Bluff Creek last year, and they sure did sound like primates. The barred owl is taking over out here and pushing the spotted owl out of its territory, and those things can sound just like monkeys. If you just walked into that camp, you know, and hadn't heard them hooting like ordinary owls at the beginning, you might think, wow, those are Sasquatch out in the hills. But
let's go to Panama City, Florida. First-time caller, it's Summer's turn. Hi, Summer.
Good morning, gentlemen. I'd like to tell you about a story, about an experience that I had some years ago. I was out walking my dogs one evening right before dusk, and one of my dogs let out kind of a low wolf, and I looked up, and I seen not one, not two, but four of what I would say was probably Sasquatch or Bigfoot, and it really startled me. I kind of ran back into the house and locking up all the doors and looking out the windows like I'm crazy. And I was just wanting to know if anybody has ever witnessed anything like that, you know, like a family of them.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's very common. You know, they're said to live in family groups, and people who have habituations supposedly going on around their rural homes have said the same thing. And I've had people right here in front of me in the store tell me that, you know, this one fellow, when he was fairly young, like 10 or something, he and a whole group of kids who were playing at a potluck barbecue saw a family group come out of the woods. You know, first the male came out, and then it was followed by a smaller one, the female, and then two juveniles. And they just stood there watching the children play for a good long time. So that is a very, very common report. But, you know, mostly what the theory goes, mostly what you're seeing is kind of the rogue individuals who cross the road and may not have a stable territory or a mate or a family group yet.
Next up, AC in Pendleton, Oregon. You're with us. Hi, AC.
Thank you, George. I just talked to Bob this evening. He had gotten back from an auction, and I had left a message for him to call me because I'd learned about some bison up in Yellowstone that died, and they run an autopsy on them, and their lungs were all full of junk from the cultivar there, which is heating up.
Yeah,
and that
you don't need that.
On the TV about 4 days ago, so I called, and his wife said she'd have him call, and he called me this evening about 7, and he got back from an auction, and by the way, he is still breaking horses at 79 years old. But he told me of an Indian lady on her way to work, and I didn't catch the town, but the Bigfoot run across the road and run down the railroad tracks, and when I got to a crossing, it stopped, and she could judge by the height of the crossing that it was about between 8 and 9 feet tall. It was a male.
Jeez.
So if he wants more information on it, he still lives in Yakima. I'll give him a call, and he can fill you in on the information.
All right. Very good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Always more information out there. Let's go to Rick in Eden, New York on the wild card line. Hi, Rick. Thanks for holding.
Hi, George.
Hey.
I have a question for your guest, Stephen. When there has been a large grouping of sightings in a particular area of the country, and I don't know if this has happened or not, with all the research groups, the Bigfoot research groups that are around, have they ever gone into an area in mass to search the area to try and find the Bigfoot or try and find the evidence? And I'm talking like, say, like 100 people all together going in and searching.
I don't know. Stephen? Stephen, you with us? Stephen's gone.
Oh, dear.
Well,
maybe Bigfoot heard about this.
Maybe Bigfoot grabbed him. Hold on for a second. We don't know where he is, but we've only got a few minutes to go, so we'll continue taking your calls. Oceanside, California, west of the Rockies. Daniel, welcome to the program. Go ahead, Daniel.
Yes, I heard a story once where a girl was camping out with her family, and they heard a bunch of noises and saw shadows on a tent, so they looked out, and it was the woman's time of the month, and it attracted a bunch of males, just like at the zoo, monkeys tend to respond to that stuff. Have you ever heard anything like that?
I have not heard of that one at all. Stephen, did you hear any of that conversation?
No, apparently the Illuminati cut me off there.
They did. They got you, or I thought Bigfoot grabbed you from your bookstore.
It's likely to happen.
Let's go east.
No, I didn't hear. I just heard the last part about monkeys or something.
He was just talking about some of the various cases and issues out there. Let's go to another caller in Pennsylvania. Dennis, it's your turn. We'll get you in here. Go ahead.
Hey, George. Hi, Stephen. How's it going?
Good.
Hey, George. I talked to you like 2 weeks ago. Remember, I was in the Air Force coming out of Alaska, and we saw that UFO.
Yeah, I remember you.
Okay, well, you're going to think I'm crazy, but after that, I went overseas to Okinawa and Cambodia, and my last duty station was KSO Air Force Base up in northern Michigan. It was a Friday night in actually April, because I got out in May of 77, so it was April of 77. Half of my buddies were downtown. Marquette, Michigan's about 21 miles away from KSO Air Force Base up in northern Michigan. And half of my buddies were downtown partying, and my buddy Thomas was going to run me down. We get about 5 miles off the base, and there was a car that was broke down with its four-ways on the right-hand side of the road. So we slowed down, wound our windows down, talked to the guy. He says he's all right. He's got somebody coming to help him. He says, okay. We started to leave, and the road hooked to the left. We started into the hook, and this Bigfoot ran right across in front of us. We almost hit him. We had to hit the brakes.
What did it look like?
It was at least 7-8 foot tall. It had matted light brown hair. Smelled like about 130 dogs all tied together. He looked friendly as hell, but it was scared the heck out. We got to town. We started having shots of my buddy. Butch says, what you guys doing? You look like you're seeing a ghost. And we told him about Bigfoot, and he said we were crazy. I didn't know we were.
Now, did you think for a moment maybe there's somebody in a costume?
No, it was too huge, and it was moving too fast.
Yeah.
It just like stepped over the guardrails like he was walking over a stick lane in the woods. It was too huge, and he wasn't bulky running. Somebody in a big costume like that would have probably been bulky. But it was unreal. And
anybody in a costume like that risks getting shot at. So I don't. I hope they're not that crazy to do that.
Yeah, and we should have just hit them just to have some evidence with us.
You got that
on
right.
The car or something.
Stephen, we're running out of time here, but these kinds of stories just keep coming in, don't they?
Yeah, they do. Despite the constant media hype that we get over these ridiculous hoaxed videos, that sounded like a real road crossing sighting.
It sure did.
There's these baggy suits running across the road on YouTube every day, practically now. We've just had an incredibly major footprint find up south of Eugene. If you just drop in London, Oregon Bigfoot tracks, you'll find it, or go to a Bigfoot Lunch Club. They found in the mudflats by this lake about 122 castable prints.
That's huge. Stephen, thank you, first of all, for your passion and for investigating a subject that we have covered for so many years. And I can't wait to get the DNA results. We'll be back in a moment as we talk about the beast from Boggy Creek. Okay, this hour, Lyle Blackburn is with us, frequent contributor and cryptozoology advisor to the Rue Morgue magazine. Lyle's Monstro Bizarro blog is featured on the Ruse website, and his Monstro Bizarro Presents news column appears monthly in the print magazine. He has also contributed to websites such as Lauren Coleman's Crypto Mundo website and has been a featured speaker at conferences and horror conventions around the country. Lyle, how are you? Good to have you with us.
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
That clip of Boggy Creek is kind of scary, that sound. What do you think this thing is?
Well, it's got to be related to the Sasquatch. It's kind of Arkansas's interpretation of that.
Yeah, I think so.
It's said to be a little more hairy, a little more lean and mean and dangerous, but I think it's definitely related to to the Bigfoot species.
When it came out back in the 70s, what kind of influence did it have on people? Did it scare them? Did it turn folks into researchers? What did it do?
Well, it was definitely, the movie was kind of a huge hit. It on the drive-in circuit, it brought in $25 million. So it was scary. It had a G rating, so it was kind of a phenomenon, and it scared people, and as well people who were interested in the Bigfoot phenomenon. It came out about 5 years after the Patterson film, and in those days, you didn't have a lot of visuals. So things like this really had an impact on people who were interested in cryptozoology or, monsters. And so, a lot of the major figures in cryptozoology today, Lauren Coleman and guys like that, cite the movie as a huge influence on them when they were younger.
It was. It had it all. It had the scariness about it, but it also had some science tossed in, too.
Right. Yeah, and I think it worked on many levels, for that reason, because it was a good movie, because, it was scary and it drew in the crowds, but, it was based on a so-called true story, so that brought in the people, to do the research and kind of triggered people to look into it further,
And tell me about some of the sightings that occurred in the 70s in that region.
In the 70s, that's kind of what kicked off the media age, is what I call it. And these were covered in the Texarkana Gazette and a lot of the local newspapers down in Arkansas. The first sighting occurred in May of 1971, and that's kind of the starting point of that. It was a family was supposedly attacked after a series of occurrences around their house. They took some shots at it, and basically a guy ended up in the Texarkana hospital treated for shock and injuries. And when that guy was in the hospital down there, the doctor called one of the news reporters and said, "Hey man, I've got a guy down here who said he was attacked by a big hairy monster." And so the next day, the news guys went out and, investigated and interviewed the people, and that made it in the paper, and it just literally read, "Falk family terrorized by hairy monster." And, of course, that just really drew the attention to the area, and then from there, several people saw it run across the highway, and there was more and more sightings. There was literally, 50 within a year there in 1971.
You think they were looking at one creature, Lyle, or many?
Well, logic tells you that if it's a real animal, there's got to be more than one.
Right.
It's hard to say that if they were seeing the same one. The descriptions did range from, most of them seemed to describe one general build of an adult creature, but they did have some sightings of some smaller ones, so it seemed to indicate that there could have been juveniles present,
What got you to write about the beast of Boggy Creek?
Well, I'd always been interested in these subjects, and I was able to see the movie when I was young at the drive-in, and, at the time when I was young, my dad, he's an avid hunter, so he had taken me hunting ever since I could basically walk, We had visited a lot of small towns and camped and hunted in the Texas and Arkansas area. And I grew up in Fort Worth, which is about 3 hours from Falk. So when I saw the movie, not only was it a cool, scary movie from what I can remember as a kid, but it made me realize that, wow, Bigfoot may not just exist, somewhere in the far-off Pacific Northwest. There might be a creature like that down here close to me. So it really took a hold of me. And then as I started doing some writing with cryptozoology later, I thought, man, I want to really look back at the movie, and, the tagline for the movie was a true story. So I really wanted to look into it and see, what was true about this and what was fictionalized. And that's what led me to write the book.
And in your opinion, Lyle, where is the truth start and where does it end?
Well, that's the thing. I thought I would, find that, there was a couple of sightings and everything else was dramatized for the movie, but I found that it's the opposite, that most of the sightings in the movie and what people see, of course they were, embellished, but they were all based upon real sightings that people had reported to the newspapers or to other people. And so I found that even though it's a movie, it's definitely based on some fact, and that people really did believe they were seeing this creature down there.
And I think, like you do, that it was probably a Sasquatch type creature that they've been seeing, as opposed to Mothman, for example.
Oh, definitely, yeah. And I didn't encounter any, fantastical descriptions of it having wings or other, giant glowing eyes or anything like that. They were pretty consistent with the descriptions, and, they ran the gamut of your basic Bigfoot descriptions, although usually it would range up to 7 feet,
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of descriptions of being 8 feet or anything like that. And, it kind of had a relation to maybe the skunk ape type creatures, because a lot of people would describe it as having a really foul odor. So I kind of look at it as possibly something a cross between a skunk ape and a Pacific Northwest Bigfoot.
Tell me a little bit about the witnesses that you detail in your work. I mean, there was one case where they were seen by 5 people. That's got to be a pretty good case.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, there was some amazing sightings. I mean, a lot of people kind of believe that, all this took place in the 70s and there hadn't been any sightings, but I found that sightings have continued on. In the particular case you're talking about, there was actually 2 sightings in 1991 in which 5 or more people saw it at once. In this one case, there was a carload of 5 guys driving kind of late at night on this county road near a bayou, and a trucker was coming the other direction. And in the headlights from both cars, they could see what they described as a tall, hairy, bulky animal walk on 2 legs from out of a field, walk across the road, and then disappear into the darkness. So both vehicles stop. The 5 guys get out, and they lived in the area, and so they pretty much knew the story, and they're thinking, man, we just saw the foul monster, and the trucker gets out, and he's like, what was that? And they say, well, have you ever heard of the legend of Boggy Creek? He's like, no. So he had never even heard of it. So that was just a really amazing sighting. I interviewed 2 of the guys out of this.
And they seemed like they were telling the truth?
Yeah. I mean, they definitely seemed on the level. They were willing to talk about it, and from all accounts I could gather, they saw what they said they saw.
Well, these are what I find to be so fascinating about these cases, Lyle, because nobody that reports these is out for any financial gain or anything like that.
Oh, definitely. And I think especially in a case like this is the first time that sighting's been reported, so it's not like they ran to the paper or the TV station. I had to really dig to find these folks and to get them to tell me the story. So they definitely, were not in it for fame and fortune.
Are we still getting sightings in this town?
Yeah, definitely. I was just, of course, once my book came out, I was still getting them. I mean, I just investigated a sighting that happened last fall up there, in which a girl saw it run across the road. So, my book has sightings all the way up till 2011. So, it seems to be continuing.
Tell me a little bit about this large skeleton that was discovered, Lyle, out there in 91.
Well, that's another kind of aspect to the Fouke monster story that I've seen over the years. There seems to be a lot of confusion. I've seen a lot of posts on the Bigfoot forums and places like that. But basically, there was a large skeleton found in the woods near Jefferson, Texas, which is not very far from Fouke, Arkansas, just across the border there. And that was taken up there by a gentleman named Smokey Crabtree, who was in the legend of Boggy Creek, and some kid, they found it and got it into his hands. And over the years, there's been various theories about what that thing is. I actually had the chance to see it, and it is a crazy-looking thing. It's still, it has no skin. It's got tendons and other parts still on the skeleton, but it's definitely of a huge animal. So that was one of the things in my book I really wanted to research and to interview all the law officials and everybody that had been involved in that and try to settle the case as to what that is.
Does it look like it could be the skeleton of a Bigfoot?
Oh, definitely. I mean, when I first saw it, my jaw dropped. I mean, I didn't know what I was looking at. I mean, you can tell it's not a horse. It's not a, it's just a huge skeleton.
Does it look human, like a big human?
Well, human-like. Unfortunately, there's no head. And
that's what you needed.
That would definitely be a smoking gun as to what it is. But and so hence the conjecture on what it was. But it definitely strikes you as a big animal.
Does it look like it would walk upright?
Well, its shoulders are narrow, so that it tends to stray away from a bipedal animal. But
okay, I see what you mean.
But I do
like a bear,
something, But I finally sorted out, and I'll let the readers figure it out. But there's a really intriguing story behind the whole thing, which I go through in one of the chapters of my book.
What do you think this creature is, Lyle?
The Fouke monster itself?
Yeah.
Well, I just kind of start, growing up as a hunter, I tend to see animals as animals, so I tend to think that it's some kind of, reclusive wood ape, so to speak, that has somehow managed to avoid capture.
Capture, sure.
There's so much forestry and bottomlands up there in this area where Fouke is, and Fouke is close to Texarkana, which is pretty much at the corner of the states of Texas, Louisiana, and Arkansas. So right there where Fouke is, a lot of forest lands converge. There's like 65 million acres back in there, forestry, and it's possible that a creature could remain hidden in there.
Oh, sure. I mean, there's no doubt that it's just strange that it's not really been found. Doesn't seem to be particularly violent, and it does seem to have some intelligence to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I would think. I mean, you have to give them that because for something to remain elusive this long, they've got to have, some smarts to them to avoid humans. And, there's a lot of theories that when the rainfall is heavy, that's kind of what draws them out of the bottoms. I tried to correlate some of that, as best I could to find patterns. So, it seems like that the only times they're coming closer to the town or closer to people. And when I say town, Fouke is a little bitty place. I mean, there's not a lot of people.
Right.
And so, but on those times, perhaps the rain has forced them out. So I don't think it's a voluntary thing. The movie kind of portrays it that it's looking to be angry and, stroll around and be curious in the town. But I think it's, it's very reclusive.
What's the terrain of the town look like, Lyle?
Well, back in the 70s, when the hype started, the town had a population of 500 people. It's only 800 now, so it remains as a very, very small town. There's probably 1,500 people living in the general area, and a little bit southwest of Fouke, there's a community called Jonesville. And back in the 60s and even back to the 40s, there was a lot of sightings down there that weren't ever reported. Those never made it to the newspapers. And so when you start getting down into Jonesville, where all these other sightings are, people are very spread out. It's very rural, they only paved the roads down there, I think, in like the 90s. So, these are very backwoods area, and, if you go further southwest and south from Jonesville, you basically get out into the Mercer Bayou and the Sulphur River bottoms. So beyond that, there is just a lot of uninhabitable areas.
So a creature could hide there for a long, long time.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense with the location of where all this occurred, and given the proximity to these to the Sulphur River Wildlife Management Area and all that, it kind of makes sense.
Do people speculate, Lyle, that it's more animal than a human?
There's been a lot of people kind of described it as kind of a hairy human, and then some people would describe it as ape-like. So there's kind of been both, but I tend to see most descriptions in the realms of it being some sort of an ape-like creature.
Your book, is it still available, Beast of Boggy Creek?
Yes, it was just released in March, so...
It better be still available.
Yeah, it's all over, man.
Well, that's good for you. Good for you. Any plans for more?
Yeah. I've started work on a new book here, so I'm hoping to get that going pretty soon.
All right, we're going to talk a little bit more about the Beast of Boggy Creek when we come back in just a moment on Coast to Coast AM. I'll also tell you what's in store on our next program. Also, special note, don't forget, Linda Moulton Howe will be our special guest on Thursday. She went out and investigated a number of different stories. And as far as me, travel schedule on Saturday. So go up to my calendar section and track me down and come on by if you're in the greater Los Angeles area. Up next, your phone calls, more with Lyle Blackbird as we talk about the Beast of Boggy Creek right here on Coast to Coast AM. His website is monstrobizarro.com, linked up at coasttocoastam.com. On our next Coast to Coast program, we're going to talk about how we can restore your dreams for prosperity. And then later on in the show, we'll be talking about secret societies and the Illuminati. When we come back in a moment, more about the Beast of Boggy Creek on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back with Lyle Blackburn. We'll take your calls. Lyle, how would you rank the legend of Boggy Creek and that creature with other Bigfoot cases we hear so much about?
Well, personally, since I've done so much research into it, I rank it pretty high as being credible and very possible. But I've interviewed a lot of people in the Texas area, and there's some really amazing sightings. But for me, I've got to put that pretty high on the scale of possibilities.
When the movie came out back in the 70s, and it was a low-budget film, but it went on to make $25 million, how did they accomplish that?
Well, it was kind of like the modern-day version of movies like Paranormal Activity or the Blair Witch Project, which basically it was kind of unexpected. When Charles Pierce started seeing the reports in the Texarkana Gazette newspaper of a creature attacking people down in Fouke, he had been looking for a subject for a movie. He thought, wow, that's perfect. He lived in Texarkana. It's just about 15 minutes down the road. So he just basically got a businessman to loan him a little money, and he took a camera down there and just started interviewing people. And, he started out kind of wanting to make a documentary, but ended up, the footage was pretty good, so he brought in a script writer, and he just sort of developed it as he went, just literally no pun intended, guerrilla filmmaking. I mean, just like you would shoot, buying a camera today and shooting a horror film in your backyard, and that's kind of what he did. And just his sheer tenacity of getting the movie made, making it well and suspenseful, and then he literally took it, had a print made, and started showing it in a little theater in Texarkana himself because he couldn't get any Hollywood backing.
No distribution, huh?
No, and I mean, from the get-go, he had lines around the block of people coming in there, and of course, once people started seeing it, was scaring them, everybody's having a good time, word of mouth. He got a B-roll, like a bad roll of it, started showing that in Shreveport, and it was huge. So, of course, now here comes Hollywood, hey, we want to get in on this, and he was a good businessman, and he made sure it went to a good distributor, and that got it into the drive-in circuit, and it just went huge. It was really amazing, an accomplishment.
Did he do anything after that?
Yeah, Charles Pierce has done many films. The Town That Dreaded Sundown, which was about the 1940s case of the Phantom Killer in Texarkana. That was a good film. He did a horror film called The Evictors. He's done movies with Lee Majors and a lot of major actors. He never had a huge budget, but his movies are really pretty good and in my opinion, highly underrated in a whole.
Okay. Let's go to the calls. Let's go to J.D. in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Hi, J.D.
Hey, I'm full-blood Native American. Around here, we're still called Indians. In Oklahoma, there is a Boggy Creek down by Atoka, and there's the 5 civilized tribes: Creek, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Cherokee, and there's one that escapes my mind. There are 5 civilized tribes. And Choctaw country is down around the Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas border. And I have a lot of Choctaw friends who say they've seen things, and their parents have seen things, their grandparents have seen things, and they've all just went with it like it was part of, I don't want to say part of growing up, but they're like, hey, I've seen it. We don't bother them. It doesn't bother us. We live together and amongst each other. And I'm Creek. And the Creek word for monster is honka. And we'd always, tell the kids, I was always told, don't look out the window at night because there might be a honka looking back at you. And at night, growing up as a kid, I never looked out the window at night because I was always scared something might be looking back at me. And my grandpa told me, he goes, yeah, we were kids, me and my cousins down the river fishing, and we saw some honkas. And I'm like, honkas? He goes, yeah, Bigfoots. He goes, we saw 2 of them, and we left our fish there, and we took off running as fast as we could. And my grandpa was born and died within 2 miles in the same area. He grew up in an area till this day still has no running water, no phone lines. When we buried him out there, there's no cell phone signal, so it is way out in the sticks.
And JD, you're convinced the creature's out there?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard so many things. There's some things that they've always told us don't play outside after dark because, you might get hit with something and you're wondering, is somebody throwing something at us? And they're like, yeah, there's honkas out there throwing rocks at you because they may try to kidnap you or they just may try to knock you out just to show that, you're in our area, you're in our territory.
Well, there's definitely, I've investigated, and I know a lot of friends that have investigated sightings in Oklahoma, and man, there's some really credible sightings up there for sure.
What portions of the country, Lyle, seem to get the most sightings of these creatures? Is it the Northwest?
Yeah, I think the Pacific Northwest would definitely have the most sightings still. But as information has gotten out there, you realize that there's been sightings in most of the contiguous states and in Alaska, and there's an increasing number everywhere else. But But I think the majority concentration is still in Pacific Northwest.
When the legend of Boggy Creek came out, did the mainstream media jump on board?
Well, when the incidents were being reported in the Texarkana Gazette, it was picked up by the Associated Press. So the newspapers were carrying the stories of the Fouke monster, much further away from the regional papers. And then when the movie came out, a lot of people would pick up the story that way. They would kind of say, I'm writing about the movie, and then they'd include the information about the actual creature. So that got a widespread attention in the media. So I don't know if they jumped on it, but they definitely covered it quite a bit,
Keith is driving in Texas and now on Coast to Coast, first-time caller. Hi, Keith.
Hello.
Thanks for calling. Go ahead.
How are you, George?
Good, thank you.
I was living in northeast Texas area around Mount Pleasant, Pittsburgh, when the skeleton showed up. And I can tell you what the newspapers reported it as being. It was reported as being a tiger skeleton.
Tiger?
A tiger.
Huh.
All stretched out, it would look like something that would walk on 2 feet, but like your guest said, it was no head, no skull, but it was, if you think about a tiger being stretched out with its foot looking like an ankle, it would be quite tall.
Did you ever hear that, Lyle?
Yes, yeah, that's definitely one of the high-ranking theories here. So, yeah, and I spoke to the retired sheriff at the time who was, verified some of those news stories. So, of course, I kind of cover the whole details in the book, but yeah, the tiger skeleton was one of the theories.
I remember the cover of the movie shows this creature like coming out of the water or something, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. You know what's interesting about that? The cover, which was the movie poster for the original The Legend of Boggy Creek, was painted by a gentleman named Ralph McQuarrie, and that was his first movie poster. Charles Pierce found him and gave him the opportunity. Well, McQuarrie went on to design and create all the famous Star Wars characters for George Lucas. So I found it kind of, coincidental or ironic that, the Wookiee or Chewbacca was in Star Wars, and McQuarrie had painted that Fouke monster, which is a similar Bigfoot-type creature, on the famous poster.
Let's go to Modesto, California, west of the Rockies. Jimmy, go ahead. Hi.
Hey, George, how you doing, bud?
Good, Jimmy.
Hi, how's it going?
Good.
Good. Hey, listen, man, I was in the military with a guy from Surgeries, Arkansas, and me being out here in California, we used to swap stories about Bigfoot, and he called it the booger from Booger Creek, and we used to swap stories all the time, and that was in the early 70s. So that, whatever that is, that's been around for a while.
Sure has.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, and there's a lot of different names, depending on what where the area is you're referring it. Like I said, the booger. There's the Caddo critter. The Fouke monster. There's a lot of those.
And people though are still reporting in that region, Lyle, that they're seeing this.
Yes, definitely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's still
same description.
Yeah, same description. And like I said, I mean, there's a lot of good sightings back in the day, but some of the more recent sightings, to me, seem to be even more credible. And I was, of course, able to interview more witnesses in the modern times because a lot of the older folks are deceased. So I had to get secondhand stories sometimes on the research, but for some of the newer sightings, I could interview the people themselves, and so of course that made it a stronger case if I thought that they were credible.
Does it seem to be nocturnal?
Yeah, most of the sightings are at night. And which is odd because
you think it would sleep, yeah.
Yeah, apes wouldn't typically be nocturnal, but most of the Bigfoot sightings tend to show that the creature's nocturnal. Maybe maybe that's another reason it's hard to find. It's smart enough to sleep during the daylight hours. I don't know.
Well, let's go to San Antonio, Texas. Glenn, it's your turn on Coast to Coast. Hi, Glenn.
How you doing, guys?
Good.
Listen, Laura, what I wanted to find out, I had a friend that lived in Broken Bow, Oklahoma, right there by the Texas border. Was there a lot of sightings in that area in the earlier times, or is there still sightings now that are you aware of?
In Broken Bow, Oklahoma?
Yes.
Yeah, just north of there is some extremely credible sightings that I'm aware of, and those are very recent. I'm not sure how far the history of sightings goes back in that area. I'm aware of some, at least for the last decade, but I'm definitely in the know about some good sightings. So that area, in contrary to people's belief, people picture Texas and Oklahoma as sort of barren wastelands, but there's a lot of forested regions, and up along those creeks, this is where the sightings usually are, and up in that Broken Bow area, north of that is the Ouachita Mountains, which sort of spills over into Arkansas, and that's just a hugely forested area out in the middle of nowhere.
How far back do the Boggy Creek stories go?
The oldest reference I could find was not 1908. I've got one from 1932, some in the one in 46, some in the 50s, and then a bunch in the 60s. So as people kind of started populating the area, the sightings went up.
Interesting. Okay, let's go to truck driving. Michael in Georgia. Hi, Michael.
How you doing?
Good.
I just wanted to state that I'm an avid hunter, and I'm here in Georgia. There's not a whole lot of wilderness here in Georgia, and I know a lot of times we'll get in the area and see a big deer, a large deer, and a lot of hunters around it, and it never gets seen again. So anything with any kind of a brain, a deer's not a very smart animal. So anything with any type of brain that can hear and smell like a deer can easily avoid people in the woods, And also, my second grandparents lived in Sand Mountain, Alabama. There was a black panther that I seen that crossing the road down from the creek, and my granddad had been telling us that he was hearing something down in the woods near the creek that would sound like a woman screaming at night. And I've heard other people say that they've seen this large black cat in Georgia and Alabama. They say there's not anything such as that. The game of fish says, and I know I did see one.
Yeah, that's similar to Arkansas, and that was one of the theories they proposed for the Fouke monster, that it was a black panther, which, black panthers don't walk upright on two legs, so it kind of eliminated it. But nonetheless, people, including the sheriff, saw a black panther. So,
and there have been cases of black panthers being found, and how they escaped from petting zoos, who knows what. But
sure, yeah, definitely.
But this creature stands upright. It's big, and it's scary.
Definitely,
there's no doubt. Tell me about Monstro Bizarro.
Well, that's a title I came up with for when I started doing the cryptozoology column in Rue Morgue. Rue Morgue is a popular horror magazine, and they cover horror culture, movies, games, all that. They wanted to include a cryptozoology element, and so since I'm a fan of horror movies and everything else, but I'm also a researcher into the cryptozoology, it was perfect for me to kind of bring that element to their magazine. So it's been really fun to write about different aspects of cryptozoology to a lot of times to a crowd that may or may not ever have heard of these type things or be that familiar. So it's been pretty fun.
Lyle, why the fascination with horror movies, with the unknown?
Well, for me personally, it's just, it was kind of there from the beginning. I can remember, as far back as I can remember, kind of being attracted to the vampire movies and all that, and like I said, seeing The Legend of Boggy Creek when I was young. So it's just kind of something you're born with, and I just always enjoyed the mystery. And to me, once I kind of discovered Bigfoot and I saw the Patterson film and all that, that was always spookier to me than horror movies because...
Sure, it was real. It seemed to be.
I'm thinking, if this thing is real and it's walking around in the woods where I'm potentially going hunting with my dad, that is scary.
Have you ever seen what you think might be Bigfoot?
No, unfortunately, I've never had a sighting myself, so still...
What would you do if you came face-to-face with one?
Well, you kind of sit around and think what you would do, and I'm sure the moment would be quick and fleeting. You think you could get that great picture, and you think you're not going to be frightened, but I've interviewed so many people that say, they saw it and, it evoked fear. So you just really never know how you're going to react. I would think, if I saw the Fouke monster, I might run up and hug him, if I could.
I'm not sure you'd do that. Lyle, thank you so much. Good luck with your book. Just came out, Beast of Boggy Creek. Fascinating read, and definitely one of those fascinating stories. I'm not sure what I would do if I came face-to-face with one of those creatures. For Dan Galante, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lonehood, Sean Laudesour, Stephanie Smith, George Knapp, John B. Wells, Ian Punnett, and Art Bell, I'm George Norrie. Somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. We'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe, everyone. That's a great story. You're a believer now, aren't you?
Oh, I'm definitely a believer. It wasn't it was a two-legged animal. It was 9 feet tall, and it scared the hell out of me.
I had a case in the woods once where I saw a creature that went by so fast, Stephen, I couldn't identify it. It was big. It made a big noise. It seemed like it was moving faster than a bear could, and it just went right through the woods. And, it could have been a human being. I don't know. But it was strange. My son was with me, so he heard the same thing. And that's the closest I've come to something like that.
Yeah,
are we still getting a lot of sightings in your neck of the woods?
I'm sorry, you talking to me?
Yeah. Are we still getting a lot of sightings out there?
As I sit here in my shop, to my left, over behind the cabins, the vacation cabins they have over there, there was a report of one coming down and looking into the windows there. That wasn't too long ago. And then right in front of me across the river, there's a little two-lane highway in front here. Down on the river bar, there was a fellow who worked for one of the government agencies, Fish and Game or the Forest Service, and he heard this roar, a howl-like roar, and looked out the front of his tent flap and saw the thing walking, not on four legs, walking bipedally along the river bar. And then this was confirmed. He came up, the restaurant here next to my shop, the fellow was opening his store, his shop, restaurant, kind of a small restaurant shop for the morning, and he had heard the same sound. And this fellow who was camping down at the river bar came up and came in, his eyes bulging out of his head, and is obviously in a state of extreme excitement. And they confirmed, that was the same sound. And that's very interesting. All behind my store here on the ridge, including the lady who works in the fire lookout up there, she has found beds and footprints and had a glimpse of one behind a bush, It was some tall head and shoulders, long hair coming off it, and she didn't think it was a Rastafarian or a pot grower.
Have you heard reports of fireflies being seen around Bigfoot?
You mean kind of like orbs?
Almost like little orbs, yeah, but the firefly.
Rocks, So these seem to be threat displays. In nature, an animal doesn't want to attack unless it gets some benefit out of that. Defending its family or its territory or its social group,
sure.
Or its
unless it's on the hunt.
Source.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there are reports, like Teddy Roosevelt told that story of the guy who was almost beheaded by a thing that left giant human-like tracks. There are all these cases of missing people in the forests, and some people speculate, that it could be Sasquatch attacking. I've never met somebody who was attacked by a Sasquatch, but I think that those people who were attacked by one would be very unlikely to survive. You know?
Yeah, I would think if they were attacked, their history.
I would imagine so. And, you know, there's, along with these kind of spiritual Native American views, the forest brother, the guardian of the mountain, the boss of the woods, there also is the idea of them being sort of an ogre. Often they were described as devils. Many of the places along the map, you can find these places, Devil Mountain, Devil Ridge, whatever. Those are also areas where there used to be, or perhaps currently still are, many reports of these things living there. The local natives wouldn't even go up into the Bluff Creek Basin, I'm told, because they considered that the domain of these creatures, and it was, you know, dangerous. Not just physically, but, you know, you could get cursed. There's sort of a taboo. If you even just saw one, some natives have told me it means you're going to die. This is part of the legend and the lore of the thing. It has a mysterious power that hasn't really been understood, even with the thousands of years of experience that these Native Americans have had.
All right, let's go to a whole bank of phone calls here for us, Stephen. Let's go to Dan driving around somewhere in California. Go ahead, Daniel.
Thank you, George. You brought up the subject of the missing link. Here's what I think. I think we did all come from apes, maybe gorillas or monkeys, either way. And I think that the missing link so horrified the advanced version of the humans that the humans killed it because it was a reminder that we did come from the apes. And that might explain why there's no missing link.
You know what? Anything's possible. Dan,
into Canada, and then various forms of them all across the world. You know, we have the little orang pendek in the Southeast Asian islands, Indonesian islands. There, you know, all over the world. The Yowie in Australia. There seem to be these various forms of them, but not necessarily morphologically the same either.
Right.
But perhaps also closely related, that they've evolved in their own unique ways.
All right, let's go to our international line. We've got John out there in Switzerland. Go ahead, John. Thanks for calling.
Oh, thanks for having me on, George.
Sure thing.
And I just have an experience I had in Wisconsin about 35 years ago, if you wanted to hear about it.
Yes, love to.
All right, well, I was watching TV with my family in the living room, and I had a weird feeling come over me, and sort of a tunnel vision and sort of a strange sound in my ears. And nobody else in the living room seemed to be affected by it, so I just kind of stood up and walked outside to the front porch. And our house, the back of the house, connects with a long woods that goes up to Interstate 90, and that has a woods that goes all the way up into Canada. So we're at the lower part of the state, and I just walked out the front porch, and I was looking around, and I was feeling kind of weird because I couldn't quite see over to the left side of the house. So I walked over to the porch, looked out there, and then walked back to the front steps, grabbed a pitchfork as I was walking over to that side of the house. I walked around to that side of the house, and there was a little patch of woods. It was all real dark, and I was looking through there, but I couldn't see the neighbors' houses where I would normally see them. It was like a dark patch there. And I kept walking towards the dark patch, walking real close to it. But I had that pitchfork held out in front of me. And about 5 feet away from the edge of this wood, I stopped, and for a second or so, I just stood there about 2 seconds. And all of a sudden, the woods just started moving to my left. And it moved real fast, and brush was going, and I saw the top of its head, and it was about 9 feet tall, and ran through the woods. And then I went out there in the morning, and I looked at the woods, and all the bushes were knocked over, and they weren't run around, they were run through, and they were like a pullback, 600-pound pullback ran through there.
Some people speculating in the nature of pounds of this stuff stashed away in freezers right now, waiting.
Oh my God!
I don't know if it's true though. I mean, there's a lot of telling signs in the story that it may be fake. But I mean, I know some people handling it. The Olympic Project handled this. guy Derek Randall's very dedicated and intelligent researcher, and I know people who went and investigated on the site, Bobo and others. Jeff Meldrum, the Idaho
good researcher. Yeah.
Yes, these people, very sensible people, they investigated the story and they believe it. So we're just going to have to wait and see what comes out of this. There's a book being published and so forth, you know.
Yeah.
But it could be true. You learn in the world of Bigfoot not to get your hopes up too much with these things, though.
What about a pair that he was talking about?
The Arapaho story, I've never heard that.
I haven't either.
But there are always these stories of, you know, Bigfoot breeding with humans. And the Hoopa people around here, they say that when this happened, if the resulting infant was alive, they would abandon it out in the woods. And it was perhaps taboo, you know, they didn't want such a thing, cursing the tribe. But apparently these may have gone off and lived with the Sasquatch, adopted by them. So you have a lot of these theories that the Bigfoot is actually a hybrid between humans and some other proto-human.
That's interesting.
You know, we know from the current discoveries in paleoanthropology that many times in history there have been multiple forms of hominins living at the same time. And we bred with Neanderthals, and just recently they said we have some 3% or whatever Neanderthal genes in us. So this is a plausible idea that Bigfoot is some form of human. But, I mean, not literally a human being.
What do you think the population is? Couple thousand?
Yeah. Who knows? I'm inclined to think it's a really rare thing, but there are people like right outside of Chicago who report them living there. For them to be widespread across the country.
When you drive, if you're driving a truck, have you seen anything strange out there?
Well, the strangest thing I ever saw was in a back issue of Time magazine. Stephen King getting John Lennon's last autograph.
Not this again.
Yep. All right, let's go to Tulsa, Oklahoma. Gary, welcome to Coast to Coast.
Awesome. Hey, George, it's an honor to speak with you and listen to you all the time.
Thank you.
My question is, well, actually, I had a comment. I had a friend of mine that told me that there was an Indian tribe, I don't know if it was the Arapaho or what, that they had captured a breeding pair some time back, and they were holding it. Somehow they escaped. But I kind of wanted to know if Stephen knew anything about that. But I also had a question because he was talking about DNA earlier tonight, and he said that somebody had shot at one. I think it was in the Sierras. Mm-hmm. And I'd want to know if he could address that.
Sure. We don't know. Was that a real case? Did somebody truly shoot one?
Well, it's yet to be proven, but there's blood on the boots, and they've apparently sent, I know that they've sent a sample that was found from the kill site to the DNA project in Texas, and that passed muster as not being a known animal. So we don't know yet what it is because of the peer review and the secrecy of the journal publishing process, but it's a tall tale. They were driving along hunting for bear, supposedly legally. Perhaps, though, they were taking pot shots out the window. But the fellow claims to have had bear tags, and they saw something come out of the brush waving its arms or whatever. There's been various versions of the story, and he just went into the hunter mode,
Yeah.
And he felt compelled just to shoot. I don't
where's the body?
Bad guy, killer. He just shot at it and panicked, and then another one supposedly ran out of the brush. It was a juvenile, and he shot this one too in this hunter's blood or whatever, and apparently it died in his arms, and that's where the blood on the boots comes from. They have supposedly what they've been calling Bigfoot